Welcome to our deep dive. We've got some excerpts here from the IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook 2024. Let's see what we can uncover about global competitiveness.
It's a fascinating report.
Yeah, I was really excited to dig into it.
This yearbook, it's more than just rankings.
Right.
It digs deep into what makes economies successful.
It really does.
Yeah.
So the yearbook, it evaluates 67 countries, and they base it on four main factors: economic performance, government efficiency, business efficiency, and, of course, infrastructure. I have to say, I was pretty surprised to see Singapore back on top.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they dethroned Switzerland.
Wow.
And then Denmark dropped to third place. Even though they've got that super high labor productivity, it really got me thinking.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the IMD, they're not just looking at economic growth.
Right.
They also measure prosperity and sustainability.
So it's not just about the GDP numbers.
Exactly. It's about how a country is doing for its people.
And that makes sense when you look at Denmark. Yeah, their labor productivity is great, but their overall economic performance dipped, especially in employment and international trade.
I see.
And that affected their ranking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another thing that I found really fascinating was the U.S.
Yeah.
They're lagging behind in government efficiency.
Really?
Yeah, they landed in 19th place.
What?
Even behind countries like the UAE and Qatar.
Wow, so what's going on there?
Well, the IMD, how they assess government efficiency, it's based on stuff like public finances and tax policy.
Right, areas where the U.S. has had, well, some challenges.
Exactly, it's all in the details.
Definitely. So to really understand those rankings, we've got to look closely at how they're performing on those very specific metrics.
Exactly.
Okay.
The report also spends some time talking about how socioeconomic disparities impact competitiveness. And, figures 2 and 3, they really caught my eye.
What did you find interesting about those?
Well, they illustrate this concept of equifinality.
Equifinality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which basically means there are multiple paths to achieving competitiveness. So one country might be really strong in labor productivity.
Right.
While another country achieves similar results, but they do it through effective social policies.
It's like different recipes can lead to equally delicious dishes.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
But, the report does make it very clear that excessive disparities, that can actually hinder long-term growth.
Right. A country might seem prosperous at first glance.
Right.
But if those benefits aren't being shared fairly, it creates this, kind of a fragile foundation.
Like building a house on shaky ground.
Exactly.
One thing that really jumped out at me was that only 15% of corporate leaders, they considered socioeconomic disparities to be a major trend impacting businesses.
That's a pretty low number.
Right. It seems like a pretty significant oversight.
It does make you wonder, why aren't more business leaders paying attention to this?
Yeah, why aren't they seeing this as a bigger issue? Are they missing something crucial?
It's a good question.
Maybe they're focused on the more immediate challenges.
Could be.
But, ignoring those socioeconomic disparities, it could have some serious consequences in the long run.
Absolutely. Long-term thinking is essential here.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those regional trends.
Sure.
It looks like Eastern Asia and Western Europe, they're still the powerhouses.
They're still dominating, huh?
Yeah, they're at the top.
Yeah.
But there's this interesting shift happening.
Well,
they're both at the top, but Eastern Asia,
yeah,
they're surging ahead, while Western Europe seems to have plateaued.
Interesting. So what's driving that difference?
Well, the report points to a few things.
Okay.
Their focus on government efficiency, strategic investments in infrastructure, and really rapid technological advancements.
Yeah.
Like if you look at China's investment in high-speed rail,
Right.
it's really enhanced their logistical capabilities.
Yeah.
And it's fueled growth, both domestically and in international trade.
Yeah, it's like they found a winning formula, at least for now.
For now.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the flip side, we've got regions like Western Asia, Africa, and Eastern Europe. They're actually facing a steeper decline in competitiveness.
So what's holding them back?
If you look at Figure 5 in the report, it kind of breaks down each region's performance across those four factors.
Right.
And you can see pretty clearly it's slower economic growth, political instability, and they're lagging behind in infrastructure.
I see. So those are the key areas where they need to improve.
Right.
Okay.
Now, let's think about businesses for a second.
Sure.
They're trying to navigate all the complexities of 2024.
It's a challenging landscape.
It is. What are some of the key takeaways for them? Well, the report identifies 5 major trends that are impacting businesses.
Okay.
And at the top of the list, not surprisingly, inflation and price volatility.
Makes sense. That's what everyone's talking about.
52% of executives, that's their biggest concern.
And you can understand why.
It creates so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
Businesses are struggling to plan investments, make strategic decisions.
It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Yeah, exactly. And then, looming large, we've got geopolitical tensions.
Right. Those are definitely causing a lot of anxiety.
Coming in as the second most pressing trend.
And that's impacting businesses how?
48% of executives, they're expressing concern.
And they're right to be concerned.
For sure, because these tensions are disrupting global trade patterns and leading to all these market shifts, which creates a ton of challenges for businesses that operate globally.
Globalization makes you vulnerable to these kinds of shifts.
It really does. And then, of course, we can't forget about the ongoing supply chain disruptions.
It's a major headache.
33% of executives, they're worried about the impact.
It seems like the aftershocks of the pandemic are still being felt.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's like the pandemic, it was a stress test for the global supply chain.
Yeah, it really exposed a lot of vulnerabilities.
That's things that were hidden before.
And the factors that caused those disruptions in the first place, they haven't gone away.
Right, they're still here.
Geopolitical tensions, labor shortages, that energy crisis, all of that.
Exactly.
Okay, so what can businesses do?
It seems like they really need to rethink their whole approach to supply chain management.
Rethink it how?
Focusing on diversification, building more resilience, and potentially even moving production closer to home.
So nearshoring or reshoring.
Right, reducing that reliance on these long, complex, vulnerable supply chains.
Creating systems that are more robust, more agile.
And can withstand all these unforeseen disruptions?
Exactly, makes sense.
Okay, so we've talked about inflation, geopolitical tensions, supply chain disruptions.
What else?
Climate change.
Oh, of course, that's the big one.
It's the fourth most pressing trend identified in the report.
And how many executives are worried about this one?
27% acknowledged its impact.
So more than a quarter of executives are seeing climate change as a major factor for their business.
Yeah, it's not a distant threat anymore.
Right. It's happening now.
It's a reality. It's having real impacts on businesses all over the world.
In what ways?
Well, we're seeing it firsthand, right? Extreme weather events, rising sea levels, the consequences are pretty undeniable.
Yeah, no one can ignore it anymore.
And businesses, they're facing all sorts of risks.
Like what?
Disruptions to their operations, damage to their infrastructure, and then there's the shifting consumer demands.
Right, as people become more environmentally conscious.
Exactly.
So it's a real challenge.
It is, but you know what? I think there's also an opportunity here.
Oh, tell me more.
Climate change, it's actually driving innovation.
That's an interesting perspective.
As businesses are looking for ways to adapt and reduce their environmental impact.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
That's it, exactly.
So businesses are coming up with new technologies, new products, new services, all aimed at addressing the challenges of climate change.
And creating new opportunities for growth and sustainability.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all. It's a chance to turn a global challenge into a catalyst for positive change.
I like that.
Okay, so another big takeaway from the report is the growing importance of digitalization and all these technological advancements.
Reshaping everything.
Yeah, it's shaping the competitive landscape in some pretty profound ways.
Absolutely.
And the countries and the companies that are at the forefront of this digital transformation, they're seeing big benefits.
In what ways?
Well, they're able to adapt to the way consumer preferences are changing.
Right.
They're able to optimize their operations, and they're developing these really innovative products and services.
So they're the ones who are going to be ahead of the game.
Exactly. They're the ones that get it.
So who are these leaders in digitalization?
The report highlights a few, like Singapore, Switzerland, and Denmark.
They're the ones who are investing heavily in research and development.
Yeah, they've fostered this culture of innovation.
And they've also created supportive regulatory environments.
Right. They've made it easier for businesses to thrive in this digital age.
So it's not just about the technology itself.
Right.
It's about the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where innovation can flourish.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, before we move on,
I
want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay, what's that?
That fifth trend. Socioeconomic disparities.
Yes, the elephant in the room.
It often gets overshadowed, but it's so important.
Definitely, it's crucial.
The report makes a really strong case for why we can't afford to ignore it.
And what's their main argument?
It's not just about social justice.
Okay.
It's a key factor in long-term economic competitiveness and resilience.
So addressing those disparities is actually good for business.
It's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
It's about thinking beyond just the bottom line, considering the well-being of all members of society.
Yeah, if we don't address these disparities, we're basically undermining our own future.
It's like shooting ourselves in the foot.
That's a good way to put it. So as we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I think it's important to keep this theme in mind.
Keep it in mind how?
We're going to be looking at specific country examples.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see how these trends are playing out on a national level.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating.
Okay, let's dive in.
Okay, so welcome back. I am so ready to look at some actual country examples.
Me too. Let's get specific.
From the IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook 2024.
Right.
You've highlighted some really fascinating cases here.
I did.
That I think show how different countries are approaching, how they're trying to navigate the current global landscape.
It's a mixed bag for sure.
It is.
Let's kick things off with Sweden.
Okay, Sweden.
They're often, held up as this model for balancing economic growth with social well-being.
Right, the Scandinavian model.
Yeah, but interestingly, their ranking actually slipped this year.
Oh, really?
From 5th to 7th.
So what happened there?
Well, they did make some good progress in areas like export growth and foreign investment. But they also ran into some challenges.
Like what?
Employment, price stability, public finances, and tax policy.
So it seems like those global trends we talked about, they're even impacting these really robust economies.
Even Sweden. Yeah, inflation and geopolitical uncertainty, it's creating headwinds for everyone.
It really is.
And in Sweden's case, their ranking in disposable income equality, that also took a hit. Fell all the way from 5th to 27th.
Wow.
Which suggests that even their famous, social safety net, it might be feeling the strain.
That's concerning.
Yeah, it gives you pause.
Okay, so you also mentioned the UAE.
Yes, the UAE.
They had this really impressive climb in the rankings.
They did.
They got the 10th spot overall, and their performance in government efficiency was amazing.
Really stood out.
Yeah, they even surpassed the U.S.
So what's their secret sauce?
It seems like their success story, it's all about these big improvements in government budget balance, transparency, and they've really been tackling corruption.
That's great to hear.
And they've also been making some strategic investments in things like infrastructure and R&D.
Smart moves.
Yeah, they're setting themselves up for future growth.
It sounds like they're trying to diversify their economy.
They are.
Moving beyond oil.
Right, exactly. But are there any downsides to their approach?
That's a good question. While their investments are great, they're relying really heavily on foreign labor for all these projects, which raises some concerns about long-term sustainability.
Right.
How are they going to deal with the potential social and economic imbalances that could come from that dependence? It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
It's something to think about.
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
All right, let's shift gears a bit.
Okay, where to next?
Let's look at the Netherlands.
Okay, the Netherlands.
They dropped a bit in the rankings.
Where?
8th place.
They've always been strong in infrastructure.
They have.
But the report, it shows declines in other areas.
Yeah, economic performance, government efficiency, and business efficiency.
So, across the board.
Yeah, and it seems like they're facing a few different challenges.
Like what?
Slower GDP growth, struggling with those high energy prices and inflation.
Right.
And then they've got a shortage of skilled labor.
Yeah, that's a problem in a lot of places these days.
It is, and it's really impacting their ability to innovate.
And to grow. Yeah, certain sectors are feeling it more than others.
Right. Again, we're seeing those global trends playing a role here.
They're interconnected, these economies.
It really emphasizes how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, these challenges, they go beyond national borders.
Okay, let's switch gears again.
All right, who's next on our list?
Let's talk about Peru.
Okay, Peru.
They have been facing some serious headwinds.
Oh, how bad is it?
They dropped to 60th in the overall rankings.
Wow, that's a steep fall.
It is, and the report highlights some concerns.
About what?
about their business environment.
Specifically?
Things like corruption and political instability.
That's never good for business.
No, it erodes investor confidence.
Yeah, makes it hard to attract foreign capital.
And that makes it hard for them to grow.
So what's the solution? What can Peru do to turn things around?
Well, it seems like their path to recovery, it depends on a few key things.
Like what?
Strengthening their institutions, really tackling corruption.
Those are big challenges.
They are, and they need to foster a more stable and predictable business environment.
Right. Create some certainty.
Yeah. And then there's the issue of inequality.
Oh, right. That's a factor in Peru, too.
It is. And addressing that, those high levels of inequality, that's crucial for unlocking their long-term growth potential.
You can't have sustainable growth without addressing inequality.
Right. It all ties together.
So we've looked at Sweden, the UAE, the Netherlands, and Peru. Quite a range of countries.
It is a good mix.
What are some of the common themes that stand out to you?
You know, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that competitiveness in the 21st century, it's just not about those traditional economic indicators anymore.
Right, it's bigger than that.
It's about building societies that are resilient, adaptable, and inclusive.
Able to weather the storms.
Yeah, and ensuring a high quality of life for all their citizens.
Not just the wealthy few.
Exactly. It's about creating a society that works for everyone.
That's a great point. And that ties back to what we were talking about earlier.
Right.
About socioeconomic disparities and sustainability.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just achieve economic growth.
Right.
You have to do it in a way that benefits everyone.
And protects the future.
Absolutely. It's about long-term thinking.
The countries that can strike that balance,
they're the ones that are going to thrive.
They're the ones that are going to be truly successful.
All right, so let's dive into some of those key trends impacting businesses in 2024.
Okay, sounds good.
Starting with supply chain disruptions.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It's a hot topic for a reason.
It's a headache for a lot of businesses.
It really is. You know, the pandemic, it exposed those vulnerabilities in our global economy.
And those challenges, they haven't gone away.
No, they're still here.
What are some of the things that businesses are doing to address this?
It seems like they're really starting to rethink their approach to supply chain management.
In what ways?
Well, they're focusing on diversification, building resilience, and even considering moving production closer to home.
So nearshoring or reshoring?
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense.
Reducing that reliance on those really long, complex, and vulnerable supply chains.
Right. They're trying to create systems that are more robust, more agile, and able to withstand those disruptions. Right, because you never know what's going to happen.
That's the thing. You have to be prepared for anything.
Exactly.
Okay, so supply chains are a major issue. What else is on the radar for businesses?
Climate change.
Of course, that's a big one.
It's another one of those trends that's shaping the business landscape.
In what ways?
Well, it's both a challenge and an opportunity.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, we're seeing the effects of climate change.
Right.
It's no longer just a future threat.
It's happening now.
Yeah, it's a present reality. And it's having real impacts on businesses.
Give me some examples.
Well, we've got those extreme weather events, rising sea levels. These are things that businesses have to deal with.
Yeah, they have to adapt.
They do, and they're facing all sorts of risks.
Like what?
Disruptions to their operations, damage to their infrastructure.
Right.
And then you've got the shifting consumer demands as people become more environmentally conscious.
So it's a multifaceted challenge.
It is, but I think there's a silver lining here.
What's that?
Climate change. It's actually driving innovation.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, as businesses try to adapt and reduce their environmental impact, they're coming up with all sorts of new solutions.
So they're turning a challenge into an opportunity.
That's it.
Finding ways to make a profit while also being sustainable.
It's a win-win.
All right, so we've got supply chains and climate change.
Yeah, and now let's talk about digitalization.
Okay, digitalization.
And all those technological advancements.
It's moving so fast.
It is, and it's really changing everything.
Reshaping the way we do business.
Absolutely, and the countries and companies that are leading the way in this digital transformation, they're seeing some serious benefits.
Like what?
Well, they're better equipped to adapt to those changing consumer preferences. They can optimize their operations, and they're coming up with all sorts of new and innovative products and services.
So they're the ones who are staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
And who are some of these digital leaders?
The report highlights a few.
Okay, who are they?
Singapore, Switzerland, Denmark.
They're the ones who are investing heavily in R&D.
They are.
Fostering that culture of innovation and creating those supportive regulatory environments.
Yeah, so businesses can thrive in this digital age.
Makes sense.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part, I want to bring up that fifth trend again.
The one we keep coming back to.
Socioeconomic disparities.
It's important.
It is, and even though only 15% of corporate leaders ranked it as a major trend...
That's a pretty low number.
It is, but the report, it emphasizes that this figure is going to rise.
It's going to become more important.
Yeah, it's going to be harder to ignore.
So why do you think that is? Why is this trend going to become more prominent?
I think it's because of all the other things that are happening.
Like what?
Climate change, automation, globalization.
They're all interconnected.
They are. And they're all likely to make those existing inequalities even worse.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, one global challenge just amplifies the next.
Creating a cascade of consequences.
Exactly. And if businesses and governments don't address these disparities, they're basically undermining their own long-term competitiveness.
And creating a more fragile and unstable world.
Right. It's in everyone's best interest to address this.
So it's not just about doing the right thing.
Right.
It's about smart economics.
It's about creating a more inclusive society.
Which leads to sustainable growth and resilience.
Right. So as we move on to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, the grand finale.
We've explored the global rankings. We've looked at those specific country examples. We've unpacked those key trends shaping the business world.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, and now it's time to kind of pull it all together.
Synthesize what we've learned.
And think about what it all means for the future.
I like it. So, what are your big takeaways so far? What stands out to you from this IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook 2024?
I think what really strikes me is how the definition of competitiveness is changing.
Evolving.
Yeah, it's not just about economic power anymore.
It's about so much more.
It's about creating societies that are prosperous, sustainable, and inclusive.
Right. It's about finding that balance.
And the countries that can do that, they're the ones that are going to really thrive in the years to come.
I completely agree. The report, it shows a world that's in flux, where you have to be adaptable, resilient.
And committed to social and environmental responsibility.
Absolutely. Those are the key ingredients for success.
But it also gives me a sense of hope.
Oh, how so?
Because it highlights the power of innovation and collaboration.
To tackle those global challenges.
And create a more equitable and sustainable future.
It's a call to action.
It is.
So in part 3, let's explore what steps businesses and governments can take.
Yes, let's get practical.
To build this future and create a world where everyone has the opportunity to succeed.
Welcome back to our final segment.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
Explore all these facets of competitiveness.
Yeah, we've looked at the rankings, we've delved into specific countries.
And unpacked those major trends.
Now, let's try to make sense of it all.
Right, bring it all together.
What does it mean for the future?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
As we've seen, the definition of competitiveness is, well, it's evolving.
It's not static.
It's not just about being the richest or having the most powerful economy.
It's more nuanced than that.
It's about creating societies that are prosperous, sustainable, and inclusive.
All three, they have to go hand in hand.
Exactly. And the countries that can find that balance, they're the ones that are going to really thrive in the long run.
Agreed. So the question is, how do we get there?
Right. What can businesses and governments do
to ensure a more sustainable and inclusive future?
The IMD report, it doesn't offer easy answers.
No magic bullet.
But it does give us some pretty valuable clues.
It points us in the right direction.
So one of the big things the report emphasizes is this idea of balance.
Balance between what?
Between economic growth, social equity, and environmental integrity.
Right. You can't just focus on one at the expense of the others.
I can't keep chasing those short-term gains.
Yeah, like quarterly profits.
Election cycles.
And to think long-term.
Exactly. It's about building a world that works for everyone.
Not just the privileged few.
It requires a real shift in mindset.
A change in perspective.
Both in the public and private sectors.
We need businesses to step up.
Absolutely.
Embrace their role as responsible stewards.
Of society and the environment.
Not just profit-making machines.
Doing good can actually be good for business.
It's about purpose, not just profit.
And governments, they have a role to play too.
How so?
They need to create policies that incentivize sustainable and inclusive practices.
Not just rewarding those short-term gains.
Investing in education, healthcare, infrastructure.
Those are the foundations of a strong society.
It's about creating a level playing field where everyone has a chance to succeed.
Regardless of their background or circumstances.
And we also need more collaboration.
Between who?
Businesses, governments, civil society.
Working together to find solutions.
That benefit everyone.
Because we're all in this together.
Exactly. Our collective future depends on it.
So this deep dive into the IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook.
It's been eye-opening.
It really highlights the complexity of competitiveness.
In the 21st century.
And it underscores the need for a more holistic and sustainable approach.
It's not just about GDP anymore.
It's about people, planet, and prosperity.
It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
And that's a future worth striving for.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning,
and keep pushing for a better world.